That's what you're gonna get. So that's what it is. That's something special on the spot. So I'm glad y'all listen. All right, Sabine, where are you? There you go. Come on, Sabine, come to the stage. So let's put some music on for Sabine. Sabine Franco.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself to the people.
So I am Sabine Franco. I am the owner of Franco Law Firm PC. We are a real estate transactions law firm. So we practice primarily, I'm going to get down here because I feel more comfortable. Is that okay? Everybody see me? So we practice primarily in the area of real estate law. We've been in business since 2012, which is 7 years. 7 years go by real fast. Thank you, thank you. We're licensed in New York and New Jersey. So who am I? So I've been practicing law for 7 years. I graduated from Hofstra Law School in 2011 and then started my firm shortly after that in 2012. Thank you, thank you. So before I went to law school, I worked in the mortgage lending industry. So I supported loan officers, I worked for banks, and that kind of opened up my eyes to the real estate whole real estate industry. And I worked in finance and then didn't really love that and decided to go to law school. And then 7 years later, here I am. So I talk a lot about first-time home buying and the home buying process and the role of the real estate attorney, but what Matt really wanted you guys to know about is estate planning. So that when you accumulate all of this wealth, when you go out there and you buy and you invest and you grow and you build, you now have all of these assets to deal with. So what do you do with that? So I just wanted to shed some light for you on the trust and estates process. Not really the process, but what tools are out there to basically what tools are out there to basically help you manage all of this wealth and make sure that you leave that for the people who you're doing it for. Your children, your loved ones, your family. You want them to be able to pass it on, and you don't want the state to take it or whatever the case is, or to go to taxes. So what is estate planning? So estate planning is the process where you create a plan for the end of your life. You basically create a plan for all of your entire estate. What is your estate? Your estate is all of the things that you have. Everything that you have that's of value, your property, your bank accounts, your retirement, everything that you own is part of your estate. And so that is something that you want to plan for so that you'll be able to transfer that, pass that on, and make all your hard work pay off, right? It assures you that the properties that you have in your financial affairs can be transferred easily, and it could go to who exactly you want it to go to. All right? Now, why do you want to plan for real estate? Why do you want to plan for tomorrow? Am I going up? Okay, so I had a picture up that showed you Prince, right? So Prince died in 2016. Next slide. Prince died in 2016 with over $200 million worth of assets and no plan. Absolutely no plan. Could you imagine? He was only 57 years old. So I'm sure he didn't think that he was going to, just pass away like that. And so 2 years later, or almost 3 years later now, his family hasn't seen a dime of that. But $5.96 million had been spent in legal fees just to figure out how much his assets are worth and who it should go to, what it should do. And especially when you're someone like that, his assets include intellectual property, which is like the rights to his music, his creativity, and those things need to be valued. So imagine if it's only 3 years later, they've already spent $6 million. What happens by the time they finish figuring all of this stuff out? So some of the tools that I wanted to show you about the tools that you could use to plan for real estate, trusted estates. So why do you need it? It helps you to determine which of your loved ones could acquire your assets, right? Who you're going to leave it to. You may not necessarily want to leave it to your natural heirs, which would be your children or your siblings or something like that, you may want to leave it to somebody else. You may have a charity that you love, or you may have something that you're passionate about, like, you know, art, where you want to create a foundation or something like that. So you can decide exactly what it is that you do with your wealth, but you have to plan for it, or else somebody else is going to decide for you. You can control your legal fees. If Prince had planned for his estate to be transferred, he could have sat down with his legal team and planned out every single aspect of his estate and not have the money just being burned through figuring things out, right? You can minimize the amount of taxes that your estate kind of incurs, because if you plan in certain ways, there are ways that you can protect so that when your wealth transfers, the taxes are not as, you don't get hit as hard with taxes, all right? I'm not a CPA, but I do know that that is a fact. So you can plan for funeral arrangements, you can provide for minors if you have children, and when you pass away, if they're not old enough to kind of take your wealth, you can plan for what's going to happen to them and how they're going to be taken care of with your finances that you left them, or the inheritance that you left them. If you don't, it could be very bad for them. Okay? And it also gives you a peace of mind. It gives you a peace of mind to know that when you move on, everything that you work hard for, that your family, your loved ones, whoever that you want is going to get it, and you don't have to worry about it just, you know, being lost. So these are some of the tools that are used for estate planning. This is just a brief overview. There's many things that can be done depending on what type of asset you have. You can have real estate, you can have stocks, you can have, you know, bonds, you can have retirement accounts. All these things have separate ways that they can be planned for to help protect your assets. So these are just some of the things: a revocable trust that I'm going to go over, a will, a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, and then of course education, because education is key to anything that we do. So what is a trust? A trust is a legal way to hold property for the benefit of another. So a trust is sort of like a separate entity. If you guys think of it like a business entity, you know how a business is separate from you? It has like its own identity. So the same with a trust. A trust can transact business, you know, a trust can buy, a trust can sell, a trust can invest, and a trust can also hold your assets. So if you transfer your assets to a trust, it can be protected, and there are creative things that can be done with all of your assets inside of a trust. There are different types of trusts. The one I'm going to focus on is a revocable trust, and a revocable trust can be changed during your lifetime. So you can make a decision about what you want to do with an asset. You can then decide you want to either change your mind, or you want to sell it, or you want to do something different, you want to give it to somebody else. You want to change the person who's going to be in charge of taking care of those assets. All those things you could do during your lifetime with a revocable trust. So it's not an end-all, be-all, you know, decision that you make. You do have flexibility. Another type of trust is an irrevocable trust. And there are reasons why you would do that, where you make a decision about your estate and then you leave it like that and you don't change it, right? So there are reasons to do that. So a revocable trust is like a contract. So it's a contract between the creator, the person who makes the trust, who's giving or transferring their assets. There's also a trustee, who's going to be the person who controls and manages the trust. And then there's going to be beneficiaries, the people who are going to reap the benefit of either the income or owning the actual properties in the trust eventually. And the good thing about a trust is that, you know, you can manage all of your assets right from the trust. You can keep your estate and your properties and your affairs, you can keep it private. Because when you go through the court system, you know, if there's a will, which I'll talk about, or there isn't a will, and you have to go through the court system, it's really in the public. It can be discovered by other people because it's public record. So when a lot of people, especially large estates, they will do trust because they don't really want everyone to know what exactly they have and what's being, you know, passed or managed. So it's a way to keep your estate private. And then again, you can protect or you can protect minors and irresponsible heirs. So a lot of times, I know in our communities, our parents have worked hard for certain things, they have built some wealth sometimes, they have invested, but because of the culture, they may not have educated their children about what it is that they have. And then if their children, don't know what they have or are not, they don't understand how to take care of it, then they necessarily can't be expected to be responsible when they inherit all of this. So if you plan for them, you could put someone in charge of the funds, and whatever income or whatever benefits are coming from what you have built, you can put someone in charge of that so that they can be taken care of, so that your children could be taken care of. And that's why I also wanted to, later on talk about how important it is to educate. So another good thing about a trust is that you could avoid probate. So probate is the process where you basically, your affairs are kind of like looked over or decided by a court how it's going to be distributed, right? So the court is basically governing and in charge of how your estate is going to be distributed, and it can be kind of expensive. It could be a long process. It could be confusing. It could cause a delay. If someone dies, or if someone dies and their family or the people who are taking the interest in their estate, if they say they want to move on, they want to just sell the property and move on, or they don't want to really have to deal with all of the ins and outs of the court system, it could be a real big problem for them. So if you plan to have a trust, you can kind of help them avoid that. Another good thing about a trust is that if you have property in all different types of states, right? Not different types of states, but in different states. So if you have property in Philly, you have property in Jersey, you have property in Florida. If you have all of your properties owned by the one trust, then if something happens to you, you pass away, your family does not have to go to each state and deal with transferring that property. They don't have to go to each state and go to court and have the court, go through the whole court system process to transfer that property or change the ownership of that property. If all of that property is owned by the trust, it'll be much easier for them to do whatever it is that they need to do with your estate. No, go ahead. Sorry. So the next thing that I want to talk about is a will. So what is a will? A will is a legal document, basically, where you're going to write down, or someone's going to put into words for you what it is that you want to do with your estate. So a will allows you to decide exactly how you want every single thing that you own to be transferred. It's within your power to make that decision, so that the court system doesn't do it for you. The court system will give your assets to whoever it is that's in your lineage, according to just how the law says, but that might not be what you want. So if you have a will, you'll be able to dictate that for yourself. It's necessary, especially if you have young children. If you have young children and you pass away, who's going to take care of your children? Who's going to be that person? I know we all have like godmothers and godfathers, but legally, I'm sorry? If that can happen. So you can plan, if you even want your friend to raise your child and be the guardian of your child, you can plan for that if you have a will in place. And then you can appoint an executor, a person who you trust, a person who you find that's responsible to deal with transferring or distributing all of your assets. And usually a will is also used with a trust, because when you say you set up a trust and you put all of your assets, your houses, your stocks or whatever it is, you put it inside of the trust, your personal belongings, you put them inside of a trust. So say you create that, and you built more wealth, and you didn't get a chance to go back and edit your trust or amend your trust or anything like that. Now, the will say, if there's anything that falls out of my trust, then I want that to be poured into my trust, right? Or, if there's something wrong with your trust, and your trust is considered invalid, like there was a mistake that was made and your trust is not valid, then the will could say that if my trust is invalid, then everything that I said that I wanted to happen in my trust, I want the will to make sure that happens, right? So these things you could do to protect yourself, but there has to be a plan for it. You don't want to have things just out there and not have a plan for how that's going to be transferred and how it's going to be protected. And so another thing that's useful for people who are, say you're thinking that, I don't want to do an estate plan, I think it's too expensive. That may be the case, there may be a cost involved, but it's much more expensive, like we could see in the case with Prince, it's much more expensive to have it just fall into the hands of the public and be decided for you, right? So one thing that you could do while you are while you're healthy and well, you can have a power of attorney. Especially if you're someone who's investing in real estate, you're buying a bunch of assets, you may not always be there to be able to handle your affairs. So you should always have a backup, because you don't know what could ever happen to you, right? So a power of attorney is a document where you can give permission to somebody else, right, an agent. You can give permission to somebody else to help make these decisions for you. You can still make your decisions, they can act while you're acting, but you can give someone the ability to help you manage and sell real estate, help you with bank accounts, help you with insurance, anything financial they can help you with. And you can make it as specific as you want, you can make it as broad as you want, you can limit it, you can have it for a short period of time, but you can plan for these things to help you. I had a situation where a client's father had a stroke and was in the hospital and couldn't make the decisions for himself. And so at the last minute, they're like scrambling, like, oh, we want to get a power of attorney. We want to be able to help with his finances or whatever it is. And he had a wife who was also elderly, so they wanted to be able to provide. And they couldn't, because once you don't have like your right state of mind, then you can no longer sign a power of attorney. You have to have what's called capacity. You have to be able to understand what you're signing, and you have to be able to understand what the effect of that document is and what kind of rights you're giving. So it's very scary when somebody's in that situation and you're like, wow, I really want to help you, but it's like, what can we do? This person can't legally give this right. So that's why it's really important to be able to plan these things. And I know it's like, we always get to the point where we're like, oh, I'm going to get to it, I know I need to do this, but you really do need to do it, even if you're fine. Because you want to be taken care of. 2, you want your family to be able to make the right decisions for you. And so the next, so how can you use a power of attorney? So I said that you could use it for financial reasons, you could use it for the life of the person, and you could even use the power of attorney if somebody's what we call incapacitated, if they can't make decisions for themselves. You can still use the power of attorney as long as it's a durable power of attorney, right? Which means that once they lose their sort of like right state of mind, you could still make those decisions for them with that power of attorney. And it can be changed. It could be, what we call revoked, which means you can terminate it at any time that you want. But at least if you have that, or at least if you have one prepared and you leave it with someone who you trust, then if they need it, then whoever you have appointed as your agent, the person who's going to make those decisions for you, that person could then have access to that. Even if you've lost your right state of mind. So it's really important to plan. And then another thing that's a good document to have is a healthcare proxy. A healthcare proxy allows someone to make a decision for you if you're like in the hospital, if you need life-saving treatment, or if you don't want life-saving treatment. You can basically put all that information together and say, listen, if this happens to me, I want this person to make these decisions. I want them to be able to say yes to this or no to that, so that your actual wishes can be had. Another thing is sometimes when there's situations where someone ends up in a hospital, right, and they can make decisions, but they're not really all there, right? So if the law will allow for a doctor to determine whether or not you are able to make decisions for yourself. But if your loved one knows that, auntie may be there, but she don't seem like herself, you know? If she had a healthcare proxy or something of that nature, that would be able to help you with those decisions. They could say, listen, this is really his or her true wishes. Okay? I know it's not sexy and exciting information, but it's something that we need to have, and it's very important that you take care of yourselves and you plan for your future. And then so there's also something that's called a living will with a healthcare proxy will help give details about exactly what type of treatments that you want. So God forbid we're talking about cancer or something like that, you could say, I want chemo, or I don't want chemo, I do, you know, it depends on, there's a lot of things that can be said, but it gives details to the person who has your healthcare proxy on what exactly to do for you. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about education, how important it is to educate your children and your heirs on what it is what assets that you have. If you are an investor, teach them how to invest. If you own property, teach them how to manage and own the properties. Teach them how to get financing. Teach them how to be a landlord. Teach them how to, if they can't be a landlord, to get someone to help them manage the properties. You know, give them the tools. Because a lot of times we just walk around and we just, you know, we go about our lives and we don't really take the time to explain to our children what we're doing. Take them with you. You know, there's realtors in the room, there's bankers in the room. Take them with you so that they can learn what you're doing and what exactly it is that, you know, they're looking to inherit. And if they decide that they don't want to, also teach them what they should do to transfer it or get rid of it so that they don't lose it. Okay? So I hope that was helpful to you. I know. I love, you know, helping people and making sure that, you know, everyone has the knowledge that they need. So I'm so happy to come here to be able to share what I can on this subject.
Anybody have any questions? All right, hold on. Let's start with my man right here.
How you guys doing? My name is Kadeem. I'm an investor. Question about wills and probate. So my family situation where there was a will, but we lost the will. We have to go through probate.
Yes, you do. So basically it's going to be sort of like she died intestate, which means that she died without a will. So you're going to have to go through the court process. They're going to have you send letters to everyone who might have been an interested heir, and then they're going to go to see if anyone is contesting or wants to sort of like, basically contest, you know, what your decisions are for the affairs of the estate. And unfortunately, that's another reason why you want to make sure people know where your stuff is. So you do all this planning, and if you don't give it to anybody, there's no evidence of it, unfortunately.
The second part, this is an international property, and the person died internationally, so we need an attorney stateside and in that country, Jamaica.
Okay. Yeah, I believe the proper way to do it is to have an attorney in each place and to have them work together to finalize the estate.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Chappelle. I'm actually a real estate agent here in New York. And I just want to say thank you so much to you, Sabine, because I've done real estate in both Brooklyn and Manhattan. And Bed-Stuy, I've seen a lot of tragedies back in 2012, 2013, when families lost their loved ones and people were just taking these homes from them because they were fighting amongst each other and they wound up losing their properties. And then one wanted to sell, the other one didn't want to sell. So what Sabine is offering is very important. I say anybody who has any property right now or is planning, please get in touch with her because this is so crucial. We need this.
Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Pascal. My question is, so if you put your assets or your property in that trust, do you still need an LLC? Is that different? Or does the trust hold the LLC? And does the trust protect you like an LLC can protect your assets and protect your personal assets from being, God forbid, sued or anything one day?
Right. So what you could do is, if you have the asset in an LLC, which you still might want to have the asset in an LLC, you can have the interest in the LLC, the membership interest of the LLC, owned by the trust. So that way, if you want to leave your interest in the business to someone else, then you can do that through the trust. And then when the person takes over that interest in the business, they will essentially own the property, which is an asset of the business.
So you're saying the members of the LLC will be protected by the trust?
The trust could be a member of the LLC. Or you could own the interest in your name, and then you could leave that in the trust. Actually, you'd have to transfer it to the trust. And then when the person took ownership of that through the trust, then they'll be able to own the property that you have within the LLC.
Hi, my name is Johnny. I have a question. Pretty much on the same line. If, for instance, you have properties in Philly, you got properties in New York, but you have two different companies, two different LLCs controlling them. Can one trust cover both? Like, can they both fall into the same tree?
Yeah, because a trust, you're going to have one trust, and you're going to have all of your assets within that trust, right? So again, with that interest, you would have that owned by the trust, so the trust would be a member of the LLC, and then therefore, when they transfer that interest to the person who you left it to, they would own whatever the properties are.
Hi, my name is Mona, and I'm here with my sister, my business partner.
Hi.
And we are future investors, and I have a question regarding can my business partner be my power of attorney? Is that a wise decision?
Your business partner can be your power of attorney, but you want to definitely think long and hard. A lot of times you go into business with people, and it's great and it's wonderful, but you should have, what is a partnership agreement or an operating agreement for how you're going to interact. But what I see in business relationships, a lot of times things do change. So you may feel like you want to have your friend or your sister as your power of attorney, but when you're mixing business, now you're mixing family relationships, you might want to think about separating that. You love each other, and she may be the best person to make that decision for you. However, you may want to think about, because of all of the overlap, some sort of separation. Okay, it's not necessarily a wrong thing, but I would say that you may want to think about some separation of all of those powers.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Kevin McIntosh. I have a question with the trust. If I put my assets in the trust today and I get sick tomorrow, can that trust be broken by the hospital?
I don't know if you're talking about Medicaid planning, which is a little bit different. I'm not very versed on that. But if you put your property in a trust tomorrow, you can plan for what happens when you get sick. And the trustee, the person who you put in charge of that, will make those decisions based upon what you've given them.
Okay, Mom. The question is the medical bills. Can they go back and break the trust? Let's say it's a house, for example.
Right. I'm not 100% sure on that. I know with the irrevocable trust, it's much stronger, and therefore if you put your property in an irrevocable trust, that I know for sure that they cannot break that. But with regards to a revocable trust, I'm not 100% sure. I don't believe I don't believe that it's as strong as the other one, so I'm not sure.
What's going on?
How you doing? My name is Carlos. For somebody that's a first-time investor, and with all the things you talked about, it's all good things to have. But for somebody that doesn't have none of those, where should you start? Being that you need, things for medical, things for family, things for investments, and all those stuff of that nature. For somebody that doesn't know anything but court lawyers, where should you start?
I think what would be good is, you may think that you don't have anything. I think it would be good for you to at least have a consultation with the trust and estates attorney to kind of evaluate what you do have and advise you on what things that you can put in place now to protect you. If you start with a will, you can always sort of like create your will a little bit broadly to cover the things that you will acquire, to cover the children that you will have. So but each person should have themselves evaluated individually, because it's sort of like painting a picture. You want to have everything together as you make these decisions. There's also taxes to be considered. You want an accountant to be involved to help you make these decisions. So I say number one is knowledge. It doesn't hurt to sit down with somebody and have a plan put together, or to understand, based upon where you're going, what exactly you'd be looking to do. Because you can also budget that, and create it. Once you create that plan, you have a budget. You have a budget in mind to cover those things. So I would say number one is knowledge.
All right, hold on. Let's start right here. We got 5 minutes.
Hi. With the irrevocable trust, can you add additional properties to the irrevocable trust, even though it's already formed and closed, with a property already in there?
Well, you could cover future assets in there, and you can add to it, but whatever it is that you've already created, you cannot change.
Okay.
Another question here. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Maxley. My question is, is there any one of these documents that you can have that will encompass everything, or do you need to have all of these separate documents in order to, protect all of your assets?
You do kind of need to have all of them. So, a trust is going to do one thing, a will is going to make sure nothing falls out of that, but then the power of attorney is going to help you while you're alive or if you get sick, and then the healthcare proxy is also going to help you if you get, if you're in the hospital and decisions need to be made about your life. So they are different things, and that's why, it's an estate plan, because it's like sort of like a bunch of pieces put together to kind of help you holistically.
All right. Answer your question.
Hello, thank you so much for giving us this information, Ms. Franco. And because it's applied to something that's happened to me right now, like I said, I'm a realtor, currently holding a listing, and the seller is on his deathbed, and he already signed contract. I don't know what to do. The buyer don't know if he's going to get it. His family is involved, and we're just hoping for him to get better. But what happens if things goes to worse and he passes? He doesn't have a trust. He has a signed contract to sell his house. I have to exclude the listing to sell the house. It's not a funny thing.
I know, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
But is this buyer protected? So what can we do in this case?
In this case, if the buyer does not have a power of attorney or he would need a power of attorney for somebody to be able to make that financial decision and transfer the property. And if he doesn't have that, then there's not really, and he can't make decisions for himself to sign or issue a power of attorney. There's not really anything that can be done in this
pretty much it's going to be voided if he passes. The
depending on what
depending
on what the contract says. Usually it would be voided. If the contract says that his heirs have to continue with the sale, even if someone, sometimes it says if buyer or seller die or become ill or whatever the case is, that they still have to go through with the contract. If it says that, then you could enforce it on his estate, right? But if it's silent to that and there's no language that kind of gives that that right, then it would be voided at that point.
Thank you so much.
Got one more question right here.
Hi, I'm Anna. 2 questions for you. Because an irrevocable is something that's pretty much set in stone and you can't go back, could you give us an example from your experience where it wouldn't be a benefit to have an irrevocable trust?
Well, if you change your mind about what you want to do with your asset, if you want to sell it or transfer it, or do something completely different from what you initially decided, then you would not be able to do that. Say you left something to someone who you now have changed your mind that you no longer want to, or that you no longer want to do that, then that's something that you may not be able to, that you're likely not be able to change.
Okay. And also, does this like cross state lines? Does it matter if you do it in New York and you move to California? It doesn't matter.
Typically, the states recognize, the plans that you have made in a different state, as long as when you made those plans or you made those documents, if they were according to that state's law, they would typically recognize it. But when you're forming an estate, you're forming a trust, you're doing a will, there are different, each state have their own laws on how to do that and how to accomplish that, and what's effective and what's not.
Okay, and very last thing, so the benefit of having an irrevocable trust would be you can't change it, but you can't alter it if the relationship changes.
Right. Well, the other benefits to it is also, long-term planning when it comes to Medicaid and having yourself taken care of, but not having your assets sort of like taken by creditors and this and that. So there are benefits to it. But if you're someone who you just want to have some protections in place, but you also want the flexibility of making changes, then you may want to go with the revocable trust. But again, each person needs to sit with an estate attorney, have everything analyzed, and have the right plan created for yourself. This is not like a one-size-fits-all, or let me just choose what's right for me. You really need to have it tailored to you and what you want to do in your life.
Thanks, Sabine. I'm Corrado and I'm a realtor. Last week I received a full asking price on one of my listings, and I was a little hesitant on accepting it because the profit was coming from a trust. So one of the terms was that the trust had to be approved by the court for that to go through. What are some of the things that the court can say before they say, okay, we're going to approve this or not?
So basically what the court is going to look to see is like, what are the instructions in the trust? What rights do the trust have to transfer these properties? Because it could be limited, it could be specific. They're going to look to the price. They want to make sure that it's the best interest for the beneficiaries of the trust. So because the trustee has a responsibility to do what's in the best interest of the beneficiaries. So they're probably going to look to those things to say, okay, look at the deal, look at the price, and look at the the market value and all that stuff, and say, okay, well, we feel like it's good, or we feel like it's not a good deal.
So assuming it appraises well, everything goes well, we're good to go.
Yeah, I don't want to like oversimplify the case, but if they find that it's fair and reasonable, most likely they will approve it.
All right, good questions. So if you want to contact Sabine, where can they find you?
So you can find me on Instagram, Sabine_the Purpose Lawyer, or you can go to my website, franco-lawfirm.com, and all of my information is there.